Greetings, everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I am so glad you're here. Thanks for tuning in. Tonight, we'll continue our reading of Chinua Achebe's A Man of the People. We're on chapter 3. Before making the long journey to the capital, I thought I should first pay a short visit to my home village, Urua, about 15 miles from Anata. I wanted to see my father about one or two matters, but more especially, I wanted to take my boy, Peter, to his parents for the holidays as I had promised to do before they let me have him. Peter was naturally very excited about going home after nearly 12 months, during which time he had become a wage earner. At first, I found it amusing when he went over to Josiah's shop across the road and bought a rayon head tie for his mother and a head of tobacco for his father. But as I thought more about it, I realized how these touching gestures by a mere boy, whom I had paid 20 shillings a month, showed up on my own quite different circumstances. I even felt envious. I had no mother to buy head ties for, and although I had a father, giving him things was like pouring a little water into a dried up well. My mother had been his second wife, but she had died in her first childbirth. This meant, in the minds of my people, that I was an unlucky child, if not downright wicked and evil one. Not that my father ever said so openly. To begin with, he had too many other wives and children to take any special notice of me, but I was always a very sensitive child and knew from quite early in my life that there was something wrong with my affairs. My father's first wife, whom we all call Mama, brought me up like one of her own children. Still, I sensed there was something missing. One day, at play, another child with whom I had fallen out called me bad child that crunched his mother's skull. That was it. I am not saying that I had an unhappy or a lonely childhood. There were too many of us in the family for anyone to think of loneliness or unhappiness. And I must say this for my father, that he never tolerated any of his wives drawing a line, no matter how thin, between her own children and any of the and those of the others. We only had one mama. The other two wives, at the time, there are more now, were called mother by their children, or so and so's mother by the rest. Of course, as soon as I grew old enough to understand a few simple proverbs, I realized that I should have died and let my mother live. Whenever my people go to console a woman whose baby has died at birth or soon after, they always tell her to dry her eyes because it is better the water is spilled than the pot is broken. The idea being that a sound pot can always return to the stream. My father was a district interpreter. In those days, when no one understood as much as come in the white man's language, the district officer was like the supreme deity, and the interpreter, the principal minor god who carried prayers and sacrifice to him. Every sensible supplicant knew that the lesser god must first be wooed and put in a sweet frame of mind before he could undertake to intercede with the owner of the sky. Those are some interesting nuggets of African cosmology there. Talking about the pot, better that the water spill than the pot be broken. Better to appease the minor god that is the intermediary than it is to go directly to the sky god. Those are some interesting cosmological perspectives. Greetings, forecast. Thanks for tuning in. I'm so glad you're here. Continuing. So, interpreters in those days were powerful, very rich, widely known, and hated. Wherever the Dio's power was felt, and that meant everywhere, the interpreter's name was held in fear and trembling. We grew up knowing that the world was full of enemies. Our father had protective medicine located at crucial points in our house and compound. One, I remember, hung over the main entrance, but the biggest was in a gourd in a corner of his bedroom. No child went alone into that room, which was virtually always under lock and key anyway. We were told that such and such homes were never to be entered, and those people were pointed out to us from whom we must not accept food. But we also had many friends. There were all those people who brought my father gifts of yams, pots of palm wine, or bottles of European drink, goats, sheep, chicken, or those who brought their children to live with us as houseboys or their brides to be for training in modern housekeeping. In spite of the enormous size of our family, there was always meat in the house. At one time, I remember, my father used to slaughter a goat every Saturday, which was more than most families did in 2 years. And this sign of wealth naturally exposed us to their jealousy and malevolence. But it was not until many years later that I caught one fleeting, terrifying glimpse of just how hated an interpreter could be. I was in secondary school then, and it was our half term holiday. As my home village was too far away and I didn't want to spend the holiday in school, I decided to go with one of my friends to his home, which was 4 or 5 miles away. His parents were very happy to see us, and his mother at once went to boil some yams for us. After we had eaten, the father, who had gone out to buy himself some snuff, came hurrying back. To my surprise, he asked his son what he said. He said, my name was again. Odili Samalu. Of what town? There was anxiety and uneasy tension in his voice. I was afraid. Urua, sir. I see, he said coldly. Who is your father? Hezekiah Samalu, I said, and then added quickly, a retired district interpreter. It was better, I thought, to come out with it all at once and to end the prolonged interrogation. Then you cannot stay in my house, he said, with that evenness of tone which our people expect of a man of substance to use in moments of great crisis, when lesser men and women would make proud, empty noises. Why, Papa? What has he done? Asked my friend in alarm. I have said it. I don't blame you, my son, or you either, because no one has told you. But know it from today that no son of Hezekiah Samalu shelters under my roof. He looked outside. There is still light and time for you to get back to school. I don't think I shall ever know just in what way my father had wronged that man. A few weeks later, during the next holidays, I tried to find out. But all my father did was to rave at me for wandering like a homeless tramp when I should be working at the books he sent me to school to learn. I was only 15 then, and many more years were to pass before I knew how to stand my ground before him. What I should have told him then was that he had not sent me anywhere. I was in school only because I was able to win a scholarship. It was the same when I went to the university. The trouble with my father was his endless desire for wives and children, or perhaps, should I say, children and wives. You see, right now he has 5 wives, the youngest a mere girl whom he married last year, and he is at least 68, possibly 70. He gets a small pension, which should be adequate for him if he had a small family instead of his present 35 children. Of course, he doesn't even make any pretense of providing for his family nowadays. He leaves every wife to her own devices. It is not too bad for the older ones like Mama, whose grown up children help to support them. But the younger ones have to find their children's school fees and farming and petty trading from farming and petty trading. So he married all these women, but he has no responsibility for these women. That's a shame. All the old man does is buy himself a jar of palm wine every morning and a bottle of schnapps now and then. Recently, he had plunged into the politics of our village and was the local chairman of the POP. My father and I had our most serious quarrel about 18 months ago when I told him to his face that he was crazy for planning to marry his fifth wife. In my anger, I said he was storing up trouble for others. This was, of course, a most reprehensible remark to make. The meaning was that I didn't expect him to have much longer to live, which was indelicate and wicked. Had Mama not intervened, he probably would have pronounced a curse on me. As it was, he satisfied himself by merely vowing to never touch a penny of mine, since he must not store up any trouble for me. Mama persuaded me to sue for peace by going down on my knees to ask forgiveness and making a peace offering of a bottle of schnapps, 2 bottles of White Horse, and a bottle of Martell. We were now technically at peace, and I was going to tell him about my plans for the postgraduate course. But I knew in advance what he would say. He would tell me that I already had more than enough education, that all the important people in the country today, the ministers, businessmen, members of parliament, and so on, did not have half my education. He would then tell me for the 100th time to leave this foolish teaching and look for a decent job in government and buy myself a car. As it turned out, I arrived in the capital, Bori, exactly 1 month after Chief Nanga's unexpected invitation. Although I had written a letter to say I would be arriving and had followed it up by a telegram, I still had a lingering fear as I announced the address rather importantly and settled back in the taxi that morning. I was thinking that a man of Chief Nanga's easy charm and countrywide popularity must throw out that kind of invitation several times a day without giving much thought. Wasn't I being unreasonable in trying to hold him down to it? Anyhow, I had taken the precaution of writing to an old friend, a newly qualified lawyer struggling to set up in private practice. I would watch Nanga's reaction very closely and, if necessary, move out smartly again on the following day as though that had always been my intention. When we got to the minister's residence, my fear increased as his one eyed stalwart stopped the car at the gate and began to look me over. Who you want? He scowled. Chief Nanga. He give you appointment? No, but make your park out for outside. I go for ask him if he want to see you. Wait and be your name. Fortunately, the minister, who was apparently relaxing with his family in the lounge, came to the door and on seeing us, rushed outside and threw his arms around me. Then his wife and three children trooped out and joined in the excited welcoming. come inside, said the minister. We've been waiting for you all morning. The house is yours. I hung back to pay the taxi driver. No, no, cried my host. Go right inside. I will settle with the driver. He not give me my very good friend no be so driver. Yes, sir, master, said the driver, who had hitherto seemed a most unfriendly man to me. Now he broke into a broad smile, showing smoke and cola-stained teeth. For a mother of seven, the eldest of whom was 16 or 17, Mrs. Nanga was still and is very well kept, was and still is very well kept. Her face, unlike her husband's, had become blurred in my memory, but on seeing her now, it all came back again. She was bigger now, of course, almost matronly. Her face is one of the friendliest I had ever seen. She showed me to the guest house suite and practically ordered me to have a bath while she got up some food ready. It won't take long, she said. The soup is already made. With the small thing, it struck me even as early as this. Mr. Nanga always spoke English or pidgin. His children, whom I discovered went to expensive private schools run by European ladies, spoke impeccable English. But Miss Nanga stuck to our language, with the odd English word thrown in now and again. The host did not waste time. At about 5 o'clock that afternoon, he told me to go get ready and go with him to see the Honorable Simon Coco, Minister for Overseas Training. Earlier that day, one of those unseasonal December rains, which invariably brought on the cold Hamaratan, had fallen. It had been quite heavy and windy, and the streets were now littered with dry leaves, and sometimes half blocked off by broken off tree limbs and branches. And one had the mind to fallen telegraph and high voltage electric wires. Chief Coco, a fat, jovial man, wearing an enormous home knitted red and yellow sweater, was about to have coffee. He asked if we would like to join him or have some alcohol. I no follow you black white men for drink tea, coffee in this hot afternoon, said Chief Nanga. Whiskey and soda for me and Mr. Samalu. Chief Coco explained that nothing warmed the belly like hot coffee and proceeded to take a loud, long sip, followed by an then he practically dropped the cup and saucer on the drinks table by his chair and jumped up as though a scorpion had stung him. They have killed me, he wailed, wringing his hands, breathing hard and loud and rolling his eyes. Chief Nanga and I sprang up in alarm and asked together what happened. But our host kept crying. They had killed him and they could go nowhere. They could go now and celebrate. What is it, S.I.? asked Chief Nanga, putting an arm around the other's neck. They have poisoned my coffee, he said, and broke down completely. Meanwhile, the steward, hearing the master's cry, had rushed in. Who poisoned my coffee? He asked. Not me, oh. Call the cook, thundered the minister. Call him here. I will kill him before I die. Go and bring him. The steward dashed out again and returned to say the cook had gone out. The minister slumped into his chair and began to groan and hold his stomach. Then his bodyguard, whom we had seen dressed like a cowboy, hurried in from the front gate and hearing what had happened, dashed out at full speed to try and catch the cook. Let's go and call a doctor, I said. That's right, said Chief Nanga with relief and leaving his friend. Rushed towards the telephone. I hadn't thought about the telephone. What is the use of a doctor, moaned our poisoned host. Do they know about African poison? They have killed me. What have I done to them? Did I owe them anything? Oh, 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 what have I done? Meanwhile, Chief Nanga had been trying to phone a doctor and was not apparently getting anywhere. He was now shouting threats of immediate sacking at some invisible enemy. This is the chief, the Honorable Nanga speaking, he was saying. I will see that you are all dealt with, idiot. That is the trouble with this country. Don't worry, you will see, bloody fool. At this point, the cowboy bodyguard came dragging in the cook by his shirt collar. The minister sprang at him like with an agility which completely belied his size and condition. Wait, master, pleaded the cook. Wait your head, screamed his employer, going for him. Why you put poison for my coffee? His body was huge. His huge body was quivering like jelly. Me? Put poison for master? Nevertheless, said the cook, sidestepping to avoid a heavy blow from the minister. Then, with surprising presence of mind, he saved himself. Obviously, the cowboy had already told him of his crime. He made for the cup of coffee quickly, grabbed it, and drank every drop. There was immediate silence. We exchanged surprised glances. Why I go kill my master? He asked of a now considerably sobered audience. I be my head no correct. And even if I say I decraze, why I no go jump for inside lagoon instead to kill my master? His words carried conviction. He proceeded to explain the mystery of the coffee. The minister's usual Nescafe had run out at breakfast, and he had not had time to get a new tin. So he brewed some of his own locally processed coffee, which he maintained he brought from OHMS. There was an ironic twist to this incident, which neither of the ministers seemed to notice. OHMS, our homemade stuff, was the popular name of the giant campaign which the government had mounted all over the country to promote the consumption of locally made products. Newspapers, radio, and television urged every patriot to support this great national effort, which they said held the key to economic emancipation, without which our hard won political freedom was a mirage. Cars equipped with loudspeakers poured out new jingles up and down the land as they sold their products in town and country. In the language of the ordinary people, these cars, and not the wares they advertised, became known as OHMS. It was apparently from one of them the cook had brought the coffee that had nearly cost him his life. The matter having been resolved to everyone's satisfaction, I began to feel vicariously embarrassed on behalf of Chief Coco. If anyone had asked my opinion, I would have voted strongly in favor of our leaving right away, but no one did. Instead, Chief Nanga had begun to tease the other. But S.I., he said, you too fear death. Small thing like you begin holler. They done kill me. They done kill me. Like person way scorpion done lego arm for him prick. I saw his face turning toward me, no doubt to get me to join in his laughter. I quickly looked away and began to gaze out of the window. Why I go no fear? Asked Chief Coco, laughing foolishly. If na you no go piss for inside your trouser. Nonsense. Why I go fear? I kill person? They carried on in this vein for quite a while. I sipped my whiskey quietly, avoiding the eyes of both. But I was saying to myself that in spite of his present bravado, Chief Nanga had been terribly scared himself. Witness his ill tempered, loudmouth panic on the telephone. And I don't think his fear had been for Coco's safety either. I suspect he felt personally threatened. Our people have a saying that when one slave sees another cast into a shallow grave, he should know that when the time comes, he will go the same way. Naturally, my scholarship did not get a chance to be mentioned on this occasion. We drove home in silence. Only once did Chief Nanga turn to me and say, if anybody comes to you and wants to make you minister, run away. True? That evening, I ate my supper with Mrs. Nanga and the children, the minister having gone out to an embassy reception, after which he would go to a party meeting somewhere. Any woman who marries a minister, said his wife later as we sat watching television, has married worse than a night watchman. We both laughed. There was no hint of her complaint in her voice. She was clearly a homely, loyal wife, prepared for the penalty of her husband's greatness. You couldn't subvert her. It must be very enjoyable going to all these embassy parties and meeting all the big guns, I said in pretended innocence. What can you enjoy there? She asked with great spirit. 9 pence talk and 3 pence food? Hello, how are you? Nice to see you again. Oh, na lie lie. I noddly, I heartily, and then I heartily laughed and then got up, pretending to admire the many family photographs on the walls. I asked Miss Nanga about this one, and that as I gravitated slowly toward the radiogram, which I had noticed as soon as I had stepped into the house earlier in the day. It was the same beautiful girl as Chief Nanga in Chief Nanga's entourage in Anata. Is this your sister? I asked. Edna? No, she is our wife. Your wife? How? She laughed. We are getting a second wife to help me. The first thing critics tell you about our ministers' official residences is that each has 7 bedrooms and 7 bathrooms, one for every day of the week. All I can say is that on that first night, There was no room in my mind for criticism. I was simply hypnotized by the luxury of the great suite assigned to me. When I lay down in the double bed that seemed to ride on a cushion of air and switched on that reading lamp and saw the beautiful furniture anew from the lying down position and looked beyond the door to the gleaming bathroom and the towels as large as a lapa, I had to confess that if I were at that moment made a minister, I would be most anxious to remain one forever. And maybe I should have thanked God that I wasn't. We ignore a man's basic nature if we say, as some critics do, that because a man like Nanga has risen overnight from poverty and insignificance to his present opulence, he could be persuaded, without much trouble, to give it up again and return to his original state. A man who has just come in from the rain and dried his body and put on dry clothes is more reluctant to go out again than another man who has been indoors all that time. The trouble with our new nation, as I saw it, was then lying on the bed, was that none of us had been indoors long enough to be able to say, to hell with it. We had been in the rain together until yesterday. Then a handful of us, the smart and the lucky and hardly ever the best, had scrambled for the one shelter our former rulers left and had taken it over and barricaded themselves in. And from within they sought to persuade the rest through numerous loudspeakers that the first phase of the struggle had been won and that the next phase, the extension of our house, was even more important and called for a new and original tactics. It required that all argument should cease and the whole people speak with one voice, and that any more dissent in argument outside the door of the shelter would subvert and bring down the whole house. Needless to say, I did not spend the entire night on these elevated thoughts. Most of the time, my mind was on Elsie. Chapter 4. I usually don't mind how late I stay up at night, but I do mind getting up too early. I was still fast asleep that first morning in the Capitol when I heard the minister's voice. I opened my eyes and tried to smile and say good morning. Lazy boy, he said indulgently. Don't worry. I know you must be dog tired after yesterday's journey. See you later. I am off to the office now. He looked as bright as a new shilling in his immaculate white robes, and he had only come home at 2 last night, or rather this morning. The crunching of his tires on the loose gravel drive waked me up in and the night, and I had looked at my diamond faced watch, which I often forgot to take off even before my bath. I had just bought in and believed the claim that it was everything proof. Now I know better. But to return to Chief Nanga, there was something incongruous in his going to the office. It's going to sound silly to say this of a cabinet minister, but I could not easily associate him in my mind with a desk and files. He was obviously more suited to an out of door life meeting and charming people. But anyhow, there he was, going off to his ministry punctually at 8. Much as I already liked and admired Mrs. Nanga, I must confess I was inwardly pleased when she told me as I had my breakfast that she and the children were leaving for Anada in 3 days. Apparently, the minister insisted that his children must be taken to their home village at least once a year. Very wise, I said. Without it, said Mrs. Nanga, they would become English people. Don't you see they hardly speak our language? Then ask them something in it, and they reply in English. The little one, Micah, called my mother a dirty bushwoman. Terrible, I said, laughing even though the thing wasn't funny. Of course, I slapped the okra seeds out of his mouth, said Nanga proudly. My mother, not knowing what he had said, began to rebuke me. Yes, it is good that you take them home sometimes. When do you come back? After Christmas. You know Eddie's father is going to America in January. Eddie is the name of her first son. The reason why I felt happy at the news of Miss Nanga's journey was a natural one. No married woman, however accommodating, would view kindly to the sorts of plans I had in mind, namely to bring Elsie to the house and spend some time with her. Not even a self contained guest suite, such as I was now occupying, would make it look well. Even if Mrs. Nanga did not object, Elsie most certainly would. My experience of these things is that no woman, however liberal, wants other women to hold a low position of her morals. I'm not talking about prostitutes because I don't go in for them. So he was worried about his image. Greetings, Bawana Haguziki. He said he should be arrested, talking about the cook. Greetings, KW Don 7. Thanks so much for tuning in. I'm so glad you all are here. My host was one of those people turned around whom things were always happening. I must always remain grateful to him for the insight I got into the affairs of our country during my brief stay in his house. From the day a few years before when he had left Parliament depressed and aggrieved, I had felt like so many other educated citizens of our country that things were going seriously wrong without being able to say just how. This is the problem with a foreign education because it takes away your language and you're not able to clearly express and articulate the ideas and the feelings that you have because you're searching for a construct that's foreign to you. We complained about our country's lack of dynamicism, and abdication of the leadership to which it was entitled on the continent, or so we thought. We listened to the whispers of scandalous deals in high places, sometimes involving sums of money that I for one don't believe existed in the country. But there was really no hard kernel of fact to get one's teeth into. But sitting at Chief Nanga's feet, I received enlightenment. Many things began to crystallize out of the mist. Some of the emergent forms were not nearly as ugly as I had suspected, but many seemed much worse. However, I was not making these judgments at the time, or not strongly anyhow. I was simply too fascinated by the almost ritual lifting of the clouds as I had been one day, watching for the first time the unveiling of the white dome of Kilimanjaro at sunset. I stood breathless. I did not immediately say, "Ah, this is the tallest mountain in Africa," or "it isn't really as impressive as I had expected." All that had to wait. I had neglected to bring any reading matter with me on my visit to Bori, and the minister's library turned out to not be quite my taste. There was a decorative set of an American encyclopedia. There was She by Rider Haggard. There was also Aisha, or The Return of She. Then there were a few books by Marie Corelli and Bertha Clay. I remember in particular The Sorrows of Satan. That was all, really, except for a few odds and ends like Speeches How to Make Them. I flipped through a few volumes of the encyclopedia and settled down to read the daily newspapers more closely than I had ever done. And believe me, I discovered I had been missing a lot of fun. There was, for instance, this notice inserted into the Daily Chronicle by the city clerk of Bori. The attention of the public is hereby drawn to Section 12 of the Bori Conservancy Bylaws, 1951. Occupiers of all premises shall provide pails for excrement of such size, the size of such pails and the material of which they are constructed shall be approved by the city engineer. Article 2. The number of pails to be provided by in any premises shall be specified by the city engineer. The public are warned against unauthorized increases in the number of pails already existing on their premises. The surprises and contrasts in our great country were simply inexhaustible. Here was I in our city capital reading about pails of excrement from the cozy comfort of a princely 7-bathroom mansion with 7 gleaming, silent action water closets. Most of my life, except for a brief interlude at the university where I first saw water closets, I had used pit latrines like the one at what was then my house in Anata. As everyone knows, pit latrines are not particularly luxurious or ultra modern, but with reasonable care, they are adequate and clean. Bucket latrines are a different matter altogether. I saw one for the first time when I lived as a houseboy with an elder half sister and her husband in the small trading town of Galigi. Galigi, Galigi, Gilly, 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 Gilly. I was 12 then, and it was the most squalid single year of my life. So disgusting did I find the bucket that I sometimes went for days on end without any bowel evacuation. And then there was that week when the night soil, when all the night soil men in the town decided to go on strike. I practically went without food. As the local inhabitants at that time, you could hear the smell of the town 10 miles away. The only excitement I remember in Galigi Galili was our nightly war on rats. We had 2 rooms in the large iron roofed house with its earth walls and floor. My sister, her husband, and 2 small children slept in one, and the rest of us, 3 boys, shared the other with bags of rice, gari, beans, and other foodstuff, and of course, the rats. They came and sank their holes where the floor and the walls met. As soon as night fell, they emerged to eat the grains while we sat around the open fire in the kitchen. You could never get at them because as soon as you entered the room with a lamp, they flew into their little holes. We tried getting them with the little iron traps the blacksmiths made, on which you had to attach bait, usually a small piece of dried fish. But after one or two of them got killed, the rest learned to avoid that fishy bait. It was then we decided to go hunting. I or one of the others would tiptoe in the dark and quietly plug the holes with pieces of rags while the rest waited outside with sticks. After a reasonable interval, those outside would charge in with a lamp and slam the door, and the massacre would begin. It worked very well. As a rule, we did not kill the very small ones. We saved them up for the future. Now, all that seemed a half century away. When Chief Nanga came back to lunch just before 2, it was clear his mind was preoccupied with something or other. His greeting, though full of warmth was as ever, was too brief. He went straight to the telephone and called some ministerial colleague. I soon gathered that it was the Minister of Public Construction. The conversation made little sense to me at the time, especially as I only heard one end of it. But my host spoke with great feeling, almost annoyance, about a certain road which he had tarred, which had to be tarred before the next elections. Then I heard the figure of £210,000. But what really struck me was when my minister said to his colleague, "Look, TC, we agreed that this road should be tarred. What is this dillying and dallying? Which expert? So you want to listen to the expert now? You know very well, TC, that you cannot trust these boys. That is why I always say I prefer to deal with Europeans." What? Don't worry about the press. I will make sure they don't publish it. Finally, he put down the phone. When he finally put down the phone, he said, "Foolish man," and to it, and then turned to me. That was Honorable T.C. Cobino. Very stupid man. The cabinet has approved the completion of the road between Gilly, Gilly, and Anada since January. But this foolish man has been dillying and dallying because it is not his constituency. If it was in his constituency, he would not listen to the experts. And who is the expert? One small boy from his town, whom we all helped to promote last year. Now the boy advises him that my road should not be tarred before the next dry season because he wants to carry out tests in the soil. He has become an earthworm. I laughed at this. Have you ever heard of such a thing? Is this the first road we are tarring in this country? You see why I say our people are too selfish and too jealous? I got to know a lot about this road, which incidentally passes through my own village of Urua. Which incidentally passes through my own village of Urua. At the time, I was naturally sympathetic to Chief Nanga's plans for it, if not with his contempt for expert advice. But of course, Chief Nanga said the fellow hadn't been appointed in the first place for his expertise at all. And so it went, round and round. But none of these things was real news to me. Only his saying that he had ordered 10 luxury buses to ply the route as soon as it was tarred. Each would cost him £6,000. So he had two good reasons for wanting the road to be tarred: next elections and the arrival of his buses. It doesn't mean I have 60,000 pounds in the bank, he hastened to add. I am getting them on Never Never arrangement from the British Amalgamated. I wasn't too sure of the meaning of Never Never at that time, and I suppose I had a vague idea that the buses were a free gift, which in the circumstances would not have been beyond the British Amalgamated. After a heavy lunch of pounded yam, I was feeling very drowsy. As a rule, I always slept in the afternoon, but in Chief Nanga's house, where things tumbled over one another in a scramble to happen first, an afternoon snooze seemed almost improper, if not shameful. And I thought, if Chief Nanga could get home at 2 in the morning, be at his desk at 8, and come back at 2 looking as fresh as a newly hatched chick, why should I, a child of yesterday by comparison, indulge in such a decadent and colonial habit such as taking a siesta? So I bravely dozed in my chair while my host and his wife talked about her journey home. She asked if he had found a cook yet to do his meals while she was away, and he said he had asked someone to send one or two along in the evening. Only then did it strike me they had no cook, only a steward. I wondered how they managed with their dinner parties. A car drew up outside, and a young American couple breezed in, or rather, the wife breezed in, and the husband followed in her wake. Hi, Micah. Hi, Margaret, said the woman. Hi, Jean. Hi, John, replied the minister, whom I had never heard call anyone Micah until then. But he seemed quite pleased, actually. I was greatly shocked. These two people were no older than I and yet had the impudence to call Chief Nanga his now almost forgotten Christian name. But what shocked me even more was his reaction. I had turned quickly and anxiously to watch his face contort with fury. But no, he replied sweetly, Hi, Jean. Hi, John. I couldn't understand. I was dead certain that if I, or any of our people for that matter, had called him Micah, he would have gone rampaging mad. But perhaps I shouldn't have been so surprised. We have all accepted things from whiteskins that none of us would have brooked from our own people. Mrs. Nanga, whose Christian name I hadn't even known until now, seemed less happy. She said, Hello, hello, and immediately withdrew, her frock caught in the parting of her buttocks. While Jean flirted eagerly with Micah, I was having some very serious discussions with her husband, who it appeared was one of a team of experts at the time advising our government on how to improve its public image in America. He seemed the quiet type, and I thought a little cowed by his beautiful, bumptious wife. But I had no doubt they were both, in their different ways, excellent ambassadors. He certainly proved most eloquent when the inevitable subject came up at last. Not, I might add, thanks to me. We have our problems, he said, like everyone else. Some of us are narrow as a pin. We have to admit it. But at the same time, we have gotten somewhere. No one is satisfied, but we have made progress. We have some facts and figures about lynching, which I don't remember now, but I do remember his saying that lynching was not racial in origin, and that up to a certain year, like 1875 or something, there had been more whites lynched than Negroes. So these ambassadors were propagandizing African peoples to think that they were living in a post racial America where race did not matter and they weren't treating the black people that bad. And I remember, too, his saying that in 5 of the last 10 years, there had been no lynchings at all. That's because they reclassify lynchings as self unalivings. I noticed he did not say the last 5 years. He said 5 of the 10 last years. You see, Mr. I'm sorry, I didn't catch your first name. Odili. Odili. A beautiful sound. May I call you that? Sure, I said, already partly Americanized. Mine is John. I don't see why we should call one another Mr. This and Mr. That, like the British. Nor do I said. What I was saying, he went on, is that we do not pretend to be perfect, but we have made much progress lately so much progress lately that I can see no cause for anyone to despair. What is important is that we must press on. We must not let up. We must we just must not be caught sleeping on the switch again. I was still savoring the unusual, but I thought excellent technological imagery when I heard, as though from a faraway place, John's voice make what I call an astounding claim. I don't mean it was necessarily false. I simply don't know enough history to say. America may not be perfect, he was saying, but don't forget that we are the only powerful country in the entire history of the world, the only one which had the power to conquer others and didn't do it. I must have looked more surprised than I felt. The claim did not as yet strike me with its full weight. I was thinking that this unique act of magnanimity must have happened in a small corner of the world long ago. Yes, said John. In 1945, we could have subdued Russia by placing one atom bomb on Moscow and another on Leningrad, but we didn't. This was white people killing white people, right? Why? Well, don't ask me. I don't know. Perhaps we are naive. We still believe in such outdated concepts like freedom, like letting every man run his show. Americans have never wished to be involved in anyone else's show. As I have suggested, there is something on Chief Nanga's person which attracts drama irresistibly to him. Memorable events were always flying about his stately figure and dropping at his feet as those winged termites driven out of the earth by late rain dance furiously around street lamps and then drop painting to the ground. Here you have John speaking high monologue to me while his wife seems ready, judged by the book in her eyes, to drag Chief Nanga off to bed in broad daylight. Then a knock at the door, and a young man in heavily starched white shorts and shirt, comes to the door to offer his services as a cook. Where'ten you fit cook? Asked Chief Nanga as he perused the young man's sheaf of testimonials, probably not one of them genuine. I cook every European chop like steak and kidney pie, chicken puree, Miss Grill, cake omelet. You know Sabi cook African chop? Ah, that one I know Sabi amo, he admitted. I know go tell Master lie. Waiting you be chop for your own house? I asked, being irritated by the idiot. Waiting ID chop for my house? He repeated after me. Nah, we country chop. I did chop. You country chop be no Africa chop? Asked Chief Nanga. Nah, admitted the cook. But be no, but no be di me, the cook am. I get my, I get wife for house. My irritation vanished at once and I joined Chief Nanga's laughter. Greatly encouraged, the cook added, how man we get family go begging enter kitchen for make bitter leaf and egusi, un- unless if the man get no shame. We agreed with him, but he lost the job because Chief Nanga preferred bitter leaf and egusi to chicken curry, whatever that was. But I must say, the fellow had a point too. As long as a man confined himself to preparing foreign concoctions, he could still maintain the comfortable illusion that he wasn't really doing such an unmanly thing as cooking. Chapter 5. Jean and John had invited the minister and me to go for an informal dinner on the very Saturday Miss Nanga left for home. Unfortunately, John had to fly back to Abaca at short notice to be present at the opening of a new cement factory built with American capital. Hmm. In the afternoon, Jean phoned to remind us that the party was still on regardless. The minister promised we would be there. But just before 7, a most sophisticated looking young woman had driven in and knocked down all our plans. Chief Nanga introduced her as Barrister Miss Aquilo, and she had come that very minute from another town 80 miles away. She said she hadn't even checked in at the hotel or washed off the dust of her journey. I thought she was beautiful enough with the dust on, and I remembered the proverbial joke in my village about a certain woman whose daughter was praised for her beauty, and she said, you haven't seen her yet. Wait till she's had a bath. Are you in private practice? I asked Miss Aquilo as Chief Nanga went to answer the phone. Yes, my husband and I practice jointly. Oh, is he a lawyer too? I asked. Yes, we own a firm of solicitors. I must confess to a certain feeling of awkwardness before her sophisticated, assured manner. The way she spoke, she must have spent her childhood in England, but this awkward feeling was only momentary. After all, I told myself, Chief Nanga, who was barely literate, was probably going to sleep with her that night. Look, Agnes, why don't you use my wife's bedroom instead of wasting money? Said Chief Nanga, getting back to his seat. She traveled home today. His phonetics had already moved up 2 rungs to get closer to hers. It would have been pathetic if you didn't know that he was having fun. Thank you, MA, but I think I'd better go down to the International. Maybe you could come and pick me up for dinner? Certainly. At what time? 8ish? To give me time to wash up and put my feet up for a few minutes. I was naturally beginning to fear that I was going to be left alone in an empty 7 bedroom mansion on a Saturday night. I thought my host had clean forgotten about our dinner appointment, but he hadn't. As soon as Miss Aquilo left, he said he would take me to the other place before going to the International, and he was sure Jean would bring me back. Agnes is she who must be obeyed, he quoted. I wondered whether he would ever quote Rider Haggard or whoever wrote those memorable words to Jean, but all he said was that something urgent had cropped up. Jean was naturally very disappointed. Still, she agreed with her characteristic eagerness to run me home at the end of the party or get some other guest to do so. The dinner would have to come into the category which Miss Nanga called nine-piece talk and threepence chop. But the talk wasn't bad. Jean started us off nicely by declaring ecstatically that one of the most attractive things about Chief Nanga, apart from his handsomeness, was his unpredictability. If you ask him if he is coming to dinner, he says, I will try. How sweet, said a middle aged woman. I think British, matching her words with the gentle sideways tilt of the head in my direction. I just love pidgin English. I will try, Jean continued, can mean a whole lot of things. It may mean that he won't come, like tonight, or that he might turn up with three other people. How intriguing, said the other woman again, and it was only then that I began to suspect that she was being sarcastic. Apart from Jean and me, there were five others in the room: a British woman and her husband, a middle aged American Negro writing a book about our country, and a white American couple. Dinner was rice and groundnut stew with chicken. I found it altogether too heavy for that time of day, but the sweet was very good, perhaps on the account of it being new to me. I don't remember what they called it. As for coffee, I never touch it at night unless I have reason for wanting to keep awake. At the university, we used to call it the academic nightcap. The talk, as I said, was very good. My closeness to the minister gave everything I said heightened significance. And I don't know whether it happens to other people, but the knowledge that I am listened to attentively works in sort of a virtuous circle to improve the quality of what I say. For instance, when at a certain point in the conversation turned to art appreciation, I made what I still think was a most valid and timely intervention. One of our leading artists had just made an enormous wooden figure of a god for a public square in Bori. I had not seen it yet, but I had read a lot about it. In fact, it had attracted so much attention that it soon became fashionable to say it was bad or un African. The Englishman was now saying that it lacked something or other. I was pleased the other day, he said, as I drove past it, to see one very old woman in uncontrollable rage shaking her fist at the sculpture. Now that's very interesting, said someone. Well, it's more than that, said the other. You see, this old woman, quite an illiterate pagan, was most probably worshiping this very god herself. Unlike our friend trained in European art schools, this old lady is in a position to know. Quite. It was then I had my flash of insight. Did you say she was shaking her fist? I asked. In that case, you got her meaning all wrong. Shaking the fist in our society is a sign of great honor and respect. It means that you attribute power to the person or object, which of course is quite true. And if I may digress a little, I have since this incident come up against another critic who committed a crime, in my view, because he transferred to an alien culture the same meanings and interpretation that his own people attached to certain gestures and facial expression. This critic, a Frenchman, writing in a glossy magazine on African art, said of a famous religious mask from his country, "Note the half crossed eyes, sharply drawn and tense eyebrow, the ecstatic and passionate mouth. It was simply scandalous. All that mask said, all that it felt for mankind, was a certain superb divine detachment and disdain. If I met a woman in the street and she looked at me with the face of that mask, that would be its meaning. But to return to the dinner party, having demolished the art pundit, I felt my reputation soar. I became more than just someone spending his holidays with the minister of culture. The white American couple, especially the wife, practically hung on my every word. They wanted to know whether I was trained in Britain, what I had read at university, what I taught at the Anata Grammar School, had I been to the United States, what did I think of Americans, and their questions went on and on. So, as you can see, they were picking his brain because when he began to reveal true cultural meaning to these people, they became hungry for more knowledge and meaning about what it was this culture was talking about. Then his words had value. But the best story was of that evening came from the Negro writer. He told us about how a white American had once come up to his lunch table at the International Hotel, which, as everyone knows, is kind of an international mart for the sale of our people of all kinds of foreign wares, from ideologies to tractors. This white man came up and said, full of respect, "May I join you, sir?" "Sure," replied the other. "What do you think of the Peace Corps?" I said, "I've nothing against it. One of my daughters is in it." "You American?" "Sure, I came over." I thought this was good. I could see the other man promptly excusing himself and searching for other tables for authentic Africans. When dinner was over, the American Negro offered to drop me off and save Jean the trouble, but she wouldn't hear of it. Much to my relief, I must say. She said she had promised the minister to deliver me personally safe and sound at his doorstep, and in any case, she wanted a bit of fresh air before turning in. So, so the others left, almost in a bunch. "I guess we better be going," said Jean, clapping her hands above her head and stretching. "But we've hardly said a word to each other," I said. Jean went and put on a record, a long play high life, and we began to dance. I must say, she had learned to do the high life well, except that, like many other foreign enthusiasts of African rhythm, she tended to overdo the waist wiggle. I don't say I found it unpleasant, quite the contrary. I only make a general point, which I think is interesting. It all goes back to what others have come to associate us with. And let it be said that we are not entirely blameless in this. I remember how outraged we were at university to see a film of breast throwing, hip jerking young women, which neighboring which a neighboring African state had made and was showing abroad as an African ballet. Jean probably saw it in America, and whatever the case, her present effort, though pleasant, though pleasing and suitable in the circumstances, was by no means good high life, which in essence might carry the same message, but not in this heavy, unsubtle, altogether unsophisticated way. While we danced, I had a quick lesson in psychology. Apparently, Jean had noticed while we talked after dinner that I was shaking my legs, which meant I wanted to go badly to go to bed with some woman. Was it me or Elsie you wanted? Elsie? Oh, yes, the American couple. Elsie Jackson. Oh, I see. No, it wasn't her at all. Good Lord, no, it was you, which was true. Actually, the leg shaking business was entirely news to me, an interpretation of it, I mean. As far as I could remember, I had always done it, and when I was a little boy, Mama used to rebuke me for courting epilepsy. I don't remember whether we danced more than one number on the LP. I very much doubt it. What I remember clearly was the sudden ringing of the bedside telephone. If someone had tiptoed up the stairs in the dark and stuck a knife in my back, it couldn't have hit me more, commanded Jean, bracing me firmly from below with a surprisingly strong pair of arms. I obeyed. Then, with me and all on her, with me, with me and all on her, she began to wiggle on her back toward the telephone. She picked up the receiver and called her name. Had she just taken Holy Communion and been returning to her pew, her manner couldn't have appeared more calm and relaxed. Hi, Elsie. No, you're welcome. I'm glad you enjoyed it. I got him home, all right. I was just getting back. She hung up and put all her suppressed anger in calling Elsie a bitch, at which we both convulsed with laughter. All she wants to know is if you're still here. Do you think she knows? I don't think so, and I don't care. Later, much later, we went down hand in hand to the kitchen for Jean to make coffee. I didn't mind drinking it then. Sex means much more to a woman than to a man, said Jean, reflectively stirring her cup. Does it? Sure. It takes place inside her. The man is a mere, the man uses a mere projection of himself. I see. I wished I could tell her to stop chattering, but I didn't know her enough yet. I don't mind people talking before or during, but I do object most strongly to a post mortem. One should drink coffee silently or smoke or just sit. Or if one must talk, then choose some unrelated subject. I think Jean sensed my feeling. She was such a clever woman. It was about 1:30 when I caught her trying to suppress a yawn. I think I'd better be going. Sorry to take you out at this time of night. Don't be so British, she said vehemently. I wondered what was so British about what I had just said and why it should hurt her so much, but I decided against pursuing the matter. As she looked for her car key, she asked me if I must get back right away or would I like to come with her for a short drive through the town. Bori at night is simply fascinating, she said. But aren't you tired? You bet I'm not. She certainly knew the city well, from the fresh smelling modern waterfront to the stinking maggoty interior. How long have you been in this country? I asked in an undisguised admiration. 11 months, she said. If you like a place, it doesn't take very long to know it. We drove through wide, well lit streets bearing the names of our well known politicians and into obscure lanes named after some unknown small fish. Even insignificant city councilors, Jean apparently knew them all, had their little streets. I remember one called Stephen Awando Street. Going through some of these back streets would have convinced me, had I needed convincing, that the city's clerk's notice about pails was indeed a live issue. I began to wonder whether Jean actually enjoyed driving through these places as she claimed she did, or whether she would had some secret reason for wanting me to feel ashamed about my country's capital city. I hardly knew her, but I could see she was the kind of person, a most complicated woman. We were now back in the pleasant high class area. That row of 10 houses belongs to the Minister of Construction, she said. They are let to the different embassies at 3,000 a year each. So what? I said within myself. Your accusation may be true, but you've no right to make it. Leave it to us and don't contaminate our cause by espousing it. But that's another Chief Nanga Street, I said aloud, pointing to my left. No, what we saw near the fountain was Chief Nanga Avenue, she said, and we both burst out laughing, friends again. I'm not sure there isn't a road as well somewhere, she said. I know there is a circle. Then I promptly recoiled again. Who the hell did she think she was to laugh so self righteously? Wasn't there more than enough in her own country to keep her laughing all her days? Or crying, if she preferred it? I have often wondered, she said, completely insensitive to my silent resentment. Why don't they call some streets after the many important names in your country's history or past events, like your Independence Day, as they do in France and other countries? Because this is not France, but Africa, I said with a peevish defiance. She obviously thought I was being sarcastic and laughed again. But what I had said was another way of telling her to go to hell. Now I guess she knew why she took so much delight in driving through the slums. She must have taken hundreds of photographs already to send them home to her relations. And come to think of it, would she, lover of Africa that she was, would she be found near a black man in her own country? When do you expect Jack back? I asked, burning with anger. Wednesday. Why? I was wondering whether I could see you again. Do you want to? Sure. Why not? Let me call you tomorrow. And that is the end of chapter 5. So, as you can see, there's this passive aggressive angst, almost this Eldridge Cleaver energy of taking over the white woman and controlling her to see whether or not she would be with a black man again, whether or not she even wants to be with this black man in her own country. I want to say greetings to Sister Raw and the elders listening with you and APTV 13 Keys. Thanks so much for tuning in. As Bwana Haguziki says, she wanted some of that mandingo. She had some of that mandingo. She knew Elsie, his lover from the past, and she wanted to continue to have some of that mandingo, which is a weird, complicated relationship that these white ambassadors have with foreign blacks, because see, they are fascinated by the black men in their own country, but they're not allowed socially to touch them, especially at this time, because they have a lot of anti-miscegenation laws. So she was in Africa dibbling and dabbling. Her husband was probably also dibbling and dabbling. You got to remember, she was willing to throw herself at the ambassador earlier, ready to take him off to her bed. So she just wanted some black man to lay up with her and be with her. So I will be back on Tuesday when we continue our reading of this text. We'll be reading starting on chapter 6, going probably to chapter 9. It just depends on how long the chapters are. It's not a very long book, but I don't want to bore you too much. But you notice how I find it interesting that France is a country, and he said, when she asked, why don't you name your streets after your independence days or things in your history? He said, because this isn't France, this is Africa. That he didn't specify the country he was in. He specified the content that he represented. Don't you think that that was interesting? I find that an interesting parallel to make, because they're always telling us Africa isn't a country, it's a continent. But in this context, an African author is writing as though the continent should be, in fact, compared to all of these smaller European countries. Greetings, Anthony McPhail. I'm so glad you had a chance to tune in. You're going to have to catch it on the replay because we're getting ready to close out for the night. And I wanted to tell you, it's a Charles Schwab account, and the account is in the name of the trust, and the trustee has the power to make deposits. Okay. And we have a bank account in the name of the trust as well. So I hope that helps. I want to thank the forecast, Bawana Haguziki, KW Don 7, Sister Raw, and the elders that listen with her, and APTV 13 Keys, and Anthony McPhail for being here. I appreciate each and every one of you. I value your input and your insight. Let me know what you think. I think that he was saying something. I think that he was, because he had this inner resentment growing for this white woman who was showing him the underbelly of his country, the underbelly of his capital city. He had this growing resentment for her. He had this strange feeling about the fact that she knew Elsie, and that Elsie was there in the place and in the space. Elsie wasn't named at first, but Elsie was there to know that this is what happened, to know that this young Black professional man was bedding this white woman is an interesting thing to have happen in these times. Knowing that she's married, knowing that she's the ambassador for America, knowing that lynchings happen, knowing that they couldn't call out 5 consecutive years of no lynching, but that they could call out 5 years of the last 10 years. So maybe there was no lynching 1 year, but there were lynchings for the next 3 years, and there were no lynching for 2 years. Knowing these things about the dynamics from which this white woman that wanted him came from is very interesting. So we will talk about it later. I appreciate each and every one of you for being here. We will talk again on Tuesday. I hope to see each of you here, and I hope you're enjoying the book. All right, guys. Peace.